Okay. Now, first of all, I am very sorry that some of you have waited last week, but I thought students were following the holidays and everything much on a much stronger scale or with much more persistence and perseverance than we do. What we were told by the faculty is that no classes will be done for Thursday, and actually, as far as I know, it was in the academic calendar too. That's why I did not think of, maybe I should have, but I did not think of writing you, reminding that we are in a holiday. But next time, if something like this happens, I may be sure, I'll make sure that I do it. So we need to compensate last week's material, and also we are a little bit behind. Therefore, we need to compensate that on Saturday. You know that the compensatory day for last Thursday is Saturday. That being said, Saturday morning I will not be available. Therefore, we will need to adjust something either in the afternoon or on Sunday. I will be asking you this as a question: which of these days do you prefer? And afterwards, we are going to work it out. Now, as far as I remember, this is where we left off. The gross motor skills and fine motor skills. Sunday, it is better, right? That's what I also think. We will have more time to kind of cover a lot of things because you have other classes on Saturday and some of them will be at school. I mean, I do all of my compensatory classes, regardless it's, extra compensatory or compensation of these missed days. I always do them online, regardless of what the class is. But I think it's going to be a little bit more confusing if you have other courses to follow. So Sunday sounds good for me too. Okay, gross skills and fine skills in terms of motor skills. Does anyone remember what we mean when we say motor skills? Does anyone has an idea? Or let me ask. Okay, it's too early to ask a question and expect for an answer. I'll skip this right now, but I will want more of that participation for next time. So see, here is the thing. The motor skills are our bodily physical movements. This movement skills, very good, Botir, physical development in terms of abilities. Why do we differentiate between gross and fine? Gross motor skills are the motor skills that are about our gross muscles, bigger muscles, like shoulder, like elbow, like torso, like neck. However, when we talk about fine motor skills, we talk about the finer parts of our body, like the wrist, like the hands, like the fingers. And gross motor skills develop much earlier than fine motor skills. Kalın motor beceriler, ince motor beceriler. This question, I'm expecting an answer though. What was the directionality when it comes to growth of muscles in a toddler, in a baby? I'm not expecting to hear the scientific terminology. I just want to know if you remember the direction. Where to where? Nobody remembers this. This is one of the most important stuff we have went through in the previous session. That was 2 weeks ago, not like 2 years ago. So what's the directionality? Come on, wake up. I know 8:30 is an early hour, but at least we have some. Arkadaşlar, fiziksel gelişimin yönü nedir diye soruyorum ya. Bir de fotoğrafını koydum buraya. Biriniz diyeceksiniz ki şuradan şuraya. Şu şekilde gelişiyor. I have been repeating the question for the third time. What is the directionality of
From
growth?
head to toe
And
up to down.
head to toe and up to down is the same thing. And
Yes.
head to toe, everyone got that. There is another directionality. Inwards to outwards, kiddos. It's not only top down, but it's from middle to sides. This is why the first thing that grows in the body, the first elements of growth we see in motor development is about the head, about the neck, and about the torso. Okay, so when you look at these pictures, the first you see, like 6 weeks, 2 months, 2 months, these are the averages. You know, approximately speaking, babies generally. But the one below is 3 weeks to 4 months are the earliest and latest expected. This means if something, especially for the last part, if something like this happens, does not happen, holding your head erect and steady. If this does not happen by the 4th month and the baby is still just, flopping the head around and everything, then you should start getting worried. There must be something about the muscular atrophy, and there could be a dystrophy in terms of muscles not doing their jobs. So the first things baby learns, when we have small babies, we generally hold them by holding their head with our head. The reason is they are not able to hold their head steady and still. Head is the heaviest part of the baby's body. Skull is the strongest bone in our body. It's impossible. It's not impossible, but it is very difficult to break the skull because it makes a lot of sense because it protects the most vulnerable element we have in our body the brain. Remember that we said brain cells do not renew themselves. So if something happens to brain, sorry, it's gone. I mean, when you cut your head, when you cut your hand, when you cut your skin, it heals. When something happens to brain cells, it doesn't heal. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense that it's protected by the most, one of the most thickest and strongest, one of the most tough bones in our body. But this doesn't mean that while the brain is not free floating in our skull, it is attached to our spinal cord and everything. If, baby hits his head, if someone hits their head, the skull may not break, but they might have a concussion, right? Because it would be too much of an impact on the brain hitting to the walls of the skull and everything, and it creates a problem, a concussion or a certain things like that. So we generally try to keep the baby's head as, straightforward and as controlled as possible, because at that point their necks have not grown strong enough to hold and control the head. This generally happens at around 6 weeks. But I have seen babies showing the signs even before 3 weeks. This generally is a sign that these kids are going to have pretty strong muscle structures. The second step is elevating yourself by arm. For example, you put the baby face down and the baby lifts itself all the way to the belly. So they stand like this. This is again very much in accordance, very much in compliance with the whole idea of head to toe, because after that, our torso and our shoulders begin to gain more strength and begin to work in a stronger fashion. So the baby is able to maybe not walk at this time. No, we don't expect that, but at around 2 months, they should be able to just pull themselves up. Now, here we have a trick question. Rolling from side to back, so the baby is sitting on the side, and then rolling to the back happens earlier than rolling from back to side. Why? Why is this happening earlier? Why do you think while you're sleeping like this, turning like this to sleep or, lay down is easier for kids than vice versa? Şimdi bebek yan yatarken tık diye arka tarafına doğru, sırtına doğru dönüp yatabilmesi ve sırt üstü yatarken yana dönebilmesi farklı zamanlarda gelişiyor. İkincisi, yani sırt üstü yatarken yana dönmek daha sonradan gelişen bir şey. Ama ilki daha kolay. Diyorum ki neden? I mean, just elaborate on it. I'm not expecting you to give me a straightforward answer, but just think about it. Why could it be easier?
Hajam, could it be because they've spent like all the past 2 months on their back, so it's easier to roll on the back than the front?
Not really, but we might think of this also as one of the elements, but there is something much more scientific about it. Let me show it to you again. So let's say this is the bed. The baby is sleeping like this and decided to roll back. This happens at around 2 months. The baby is sleeping like this, but decides to move on the side. This happens at around 3.5 to 4 months. This means rolling from side to back is easier. Thank you, Lamur. Thank you. That is the very directive, very straightforward answer. It's the gravity. Gravity makes it easier. Why? Because our head is very heavy. So just you leave yourself to the gravity and you're able to fall down. But the other moment, you're actually working against your gravitational force. Therefore, you need to have stronger back muscles and neck muscles in order to pull yourself actually while you are laying down, pull yourself to your side. Grasping something. This is again, sometimes we expect at around 3.5 months or whatsoever. This is a goal-directed activity, not just random grasping. You know, when you give your finger to a kid, they would grasp it too, but grasping a cube, you know, aiming for something, these kind of activities appear. And for grasping, you need more of hand than the fingers. So happens at around 3.5 months. And side the back, we expect it to happen at around 4 to 4.5 months in general. Later development we expect is babies being able to sit up. See, this is a very important breakthrough, because here this means babies now not only neck, but the entire back and spinal muscles have developed, and also their belly, so that they can balance themselves sitting up like this. Sometimes, if they are just practicing, they might flop onto one side whatsoever, but being able to sit alone without any support or whatsoever is kind of what we expect of babies at this age. And at around the same time, crawling begins to emerge. So when you're crawling, you coordinate your arms and your legs in a fashion, again, as a goal-directed action. You want to go to somewhere. So this means at this point, baby's upper leg and lower leg and knee muscles are also developing. Pulling to stand is actually something you see a lot with the kids. You know, they sit, then they roll onto crawling position, and they hold onto things to stand up by themselves. Or you put them on a couch and they hold on to the top of the couch and they stand up. They hold their balance while, you know, they are able to balance themselves standing up with the help of holding on to something, but this still means a very important growth in terms of physical ability. Pat a cake. Why is this a milestone?
Because the baby's mimicking an action.
Baby has been making an action since they were born. What is significant about this action?
No, I'm saying mimicking, like repeating what the other person is also doing, like mirroring them.
That's more of a cognitive skill, and their cognitive skills are developing in this context as well. But mimicking, imitating someone, has more cognitive value than physical value. Why is this important physically? You are not wrong, but that's not the answer to my question. But you are on the right track.
Is it because they're coordinating both hands together to do one movement?
Not only hands, but also eyes, hand-eye coordination. So this is very important. They are able to, this means now not only their shoulders, but their elbows and underarms are having some control. So the baby is able to use their eyes and their hands at the same time to meet, two hands meeting each other. You think this is a very easy thing. It's not for a baby, my sweetheart, dear kiddos. For a baby, being able to get these two together, get this, especially these two is kind of easier, but you're looking at someone, you say, give me 5, let's pat, let's clap, and the kid is generally, if you have seen, if you tried doing this with a baby, the baby is like, so it's not like what we do when we're playing a pat a cake kind of game. The baby looks at the hand, looks at their own hand, tries to, measure this angle and everything, and then is able to hit you back, but not within a very controlled movement. Again, because our fine motor skills have not very well developed yet. At around 11 months, we would expect the kids to be able to stand alone without holding on to anything, being able to balance their body on their 2 feet without moving. We are just talking about standing alone. You know that their legs would be open a lot for the balance and everything. They would be able to stand alone at around 11 months, which kind of leads to walking, again, with wobbling, not very controlled walking. I'm sure you have seen kids at their first stages of walking. I'm going to make a very unpleasant comparison now, but you'll get the idea. You do know cockroaches, right? Hamam böcekleri. So see, they walk to you, and then they walk to another side, and then they stand, and then they turn exactly the other way. So babies are like very much roaches. You might see them, for example, start taking steps towards a wall, but because they are not very much controlling themselves, they start taking those steps in an accelerating fashion. They don't not able to stop, so either they just fall on their knees or onto their bodies somehow, some way, or they just bump on the wall and bounce back. So all of these are highly acceptable behavior. When you start walking, is learning how to walk is one of the most difficult things for a human being. I mean, I don't know if you have ever seen, I hope you don't, an adult who has lost their ability to walk and who is relearning it again. How difficult it is for people to relearn how to walk, to regain all those skills to the muscles that were automatically developed over the course of time. So being able to walk alone is a task. This is why generally parents allow their babies to walk, but they bend over and keep on just giving them a little bit of support so that if they are able to, if they are on the verge of a collapse, they just hold them. This is one of the most difficult times for parents because it's very tiring. At around 13 months, we accept the baby to be able to build blocks, tower blocks. Again, hand-eye coordination and more controlled movement of the arm, because being able to take something and put it on another thing, your hand should not be shaking. You should have a control. You think it's very easy, but you have your grandparents, I kind of presume, if they are alive, hopefully. You will see them having difficulties sometimes in completing these very basic tasks. That is the curse of the directionality. While we grow head to toe, inside to outside, so our fine motor skills develop last, we also start losing them first. Last in, first out. Therefore, being able to hold things, for example, holding the pot and putting it on the stove, these kind of behaviors might be difficult for a, pretty old elderly person. Again, at around this time, the baby begins to scribble. Let me show you what we mean by scribbling. Scribbling as in vigorous scribbling, nothing really very straightforward. But let's say we have a paper. Babies usually hold it like this or like this, and they scribble. This means they have a coordination right now between their shoulder, elbow, wrist, and hand, not in a straightforward, fine fashion, but at least, and they generally, as you see in this picture, they hold the paper with one hand, and then they scribble with the other hand. This is a practice before learning how to paint, how to do drawings. At around 16 months, they would be able to walk up the stairs one by one with somebody's help. And this also is another sign of the directionality, which means now the baby is able to control their knees in a much better fashion. Jumping is a very difficult action. You know that kids jump a lot and move a lot, and you're like, how much energy they have. It is about energy, but it's also about ability to control yourself. That's why they jump. They love the idea that they can jump, because jumping is, lifting yourself in the air and falling back on your feet without falling down. This is very difficult. And then walking on tiptoes is the last thing that grows. Why? Because our toes and strength of our toes are the last things to grow in a baby. I'm going to skip these parts because we are going to go deep into them in every other stage, every other chapter we are going to be going through. So I am now going back to fine motor development, writing, moving forward to. Writing begins to develop at around ages 2 to 6. And at first, you see that baby is holding the material either always from the bottom, either like this, or like this, or like this, This could also be one of the ways of drawing things. And as the writing ability develops, which means as we gain more control in our fine motor skills on fingers, this moves on to here, this moves on to here. The movements becomes finer. The kids, for example, are able to feel, you give them like a drawing and you say them paint this thing, and they would be able to paint it without making much mess around the lines. At first, children hold the pencil away from the tip because the movements are coming from the shoulder. So when we are holding it like this, we are not using our wrist, we are using our shoulder to make the move. Later, when we are getting closer to the tip, we introduce elbow movements. So the child can hold the elbow on the surface and start drawing. I wish I was able to show these to you like this. That this is a surface. Hold the and finally, fingers and thumbs gain control that leads to the dynamic tripod. Thumb, first finger, index finger. So being able to hold it in this tripod fashion generally happens at around 4 to 5 years, and a mature writing pattern is expected to show itself around 6 to 7 ages 6 to 7. So the first hold is called the supinate grasp. All 4 fingers and the thumb wrapped around the pencil in the fist, because this is the only way we can control it. Now, do you understand or do you see why kids like drawing on the walls rather than on paper? What is the reason? Why do you think the reason is that almost every kid likes to make drawings, I'm sorry, on the wall?
Maybe because it's not a limited space like a paper, it's a larger area, so they can just freely write as much as they want.
Could you please just repeat it a little bit more, because there is some echo? It is easier.
Sorry.
Why?
Because it's a larger area, it's not limited space like a paper. They have like as much space as they need.
Again, this could be more of a cognitive tendency, but there is a very physical reason for why they prefer to write on the wall. Or on vertical surfaces, I'm going to say. Horizontal surfaces, vertical surfaces. Why writing on a vertical surface is easier for a kid than writing on a horizontal surface? Do you see how the baby is holding the pencil? Do you guys have a pen or pencil around you? Try to hold it like the baby is holding in the supinate grasp. or it can be the other way around too. But generally it is like this. Do you see how easier it is to write on a vertical surface? Because the movement is coming from the shoulder. It's not coming from the wrist. When we start involving the wrists, then we start preferring horizontal surfaces rather than vertical ones because they like drawing on the wall, because drawing is easier because you are getting most of your strength from your shoulders and then from your elbows. The second stage is a pronate grasp. It's a palm down hand position. There is more control of the wrist in the pronate grasp. And lastly, the dynamic tripod. Children have a more mature manner of writing if the object is short. That's why they prefer crayons over pencils, colored pencils. Or that's why markers kids use are generally like the board markers. They are thick and they are short because it's easier to control these. Here, with a pencil, if you exert too much power over it, it will bend down and it's going to break. But with crayons, the shorter the length, the more sturdy the writing implement. And that is also why they prefer writing on vertical surfaces. The age of changing from immature to mature characteristics on both the finger flexion, finger flexibility, and forearm positioning. How do we use our forearm when we are writing? Changes across time and settles down at around 10. I don't know if you have noticed yourselves writing. Every single one of you prefers a different positioning. Some people write like this. Some of you write like this. Sometimes students I see, they just like it to write it like this, changing the direction of the paper. Some students use it, hold it like this, some hold it like this, some hold it from the very tip. So we all have a different way of finger flexion and forearm positioning. And this is generally based on what we have learned and how strong our muscles are. And the dynamic tripod continues to be refined until adolescence. So when you look at this picture, what does it say? Can you read it?
Is it Matthews?
It's Matthew, but it's also one more thing. It's probably Uncle Matthew. But this is as good as it gets when you are 4 years old. Another thing you should recognize is that the letters are all uppercase. Now tell me, why do you think writing in uppercase is easier than writing in lowercase? Büyük harflerle yazmayı tercih eder çocuklar küçük harflere kıyasla. Neden? Sizce neden yani?
Because it's mostly straight lines, so it's easier to write than the lowercase.
Very good point. Lowercase letters requires a lot of curves. Making a proper curve requires finer motor skills, but most of the uppercase letters are about certain lines, direct lines, perpendicular lines, different kinds of lines coming together. And still, as you also see, the letters are very big and the space is unorganized. By 6 years, the children still prefer uppercase letters, but their uppercase letters begin to be smaller. And by the age 7, they use both cases effectively. And the spacing between letters, like, writing them close enough versus writing them all over the place, is generally expected to be mastered at around 9 years. When it comes to drawing, children learn to draw before they learn to write, which is very natural and very instinctive. There are not very straightforward stages when it comes to drawing for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's not only about motor ability, but it's also about some traits and skills, you have it or not. But the progression is generally standardized. So I may ask you what this is, and you can give me dozens of things. If you ask a child, okay, what did you draw? The child might be like, it's a cat. How do you not understand it's a cat? Are you stupid? They are doing these scribbling things with a certain intention in their minds, and because they are egocentric, they expect everyone to see and understand it in that fashion. So the second stage is the combined stage. At this stage, we see combination of different elements. What do you see in this picture? Neyin resmini çizmiş burada çocuk? Yes, Gökçen.
Maybe there's a man who is trying to talk.
Okay, now that is too advanced. Man is okay. That's a man. That's definitely a man. The other thing can be anything.
Yeah.
It can be a pet.
Really.
It can be a house. It can be a carpet, whatever. Your whole idea of this whole speech balloons are too advanced for a child at this stage. But the man is a man. I mean, at least we see feet and we see a head. So we understand that this is a man. The second thing, it's pretty open to debate. Now, how about here? What do we see in this aggregate stage? Yes, Gökçe?
Is it a turtle or something like that? Maybe cat.
Maybe it's a turtle. Maybe it's a... any other ideas?
Cat or dog.
It could be a cat. I think it could even be a dog, and that thing could be a leash.
Yeah, maybe.
The circle around it could be a leash. It looks like a turtle to our eyes because we are assimilating, comparing it to what we already know in terms of turtles. But, you know, it's a four-paw, it could be a four-pawed any animal. And it is standing, it could not be a leash, but it could be a dog standing in a pool of mud. Hani böyle bir çamur birikintisinin içinde duran bir köpek de olabilir o arkadaşlar. O tamamen çocuğun hayal gücü ve sizin buna ondan sonra yüklediğiniz anlama. But what is the difference between this person, this drawing of the person compared to drawing of this person? What is the difference? Yes, Botir.
Maybe in the first picture, the children is a bit more older because his drawing is much better. So it means that he coordinates his movements quite good. And the second picture, he's just learning how to do it.
Yes. Okay, let me rephrase if I understood it correctly. Here in the second one, if the first one is just a person and it includes some basic features of a person. But the second one is much more detailed. Here we have two eyes. Our head is kind of more proportional to our body. We don't have hands and feet, but at least we have two arms and two legs. There isn't an ear whatsoever, but still, when we look at it, we see it is representing a human being. For example, my drawing did not go further beyond that. My fine motor skills are horrible, but you know, as horrible as it gets. And here, what do we see? What is the picture depicting? Yes, Rodina?
Is this like a child feeding a it looks like an elephant in a zoo?
Yes, yes, exactly. See, we can it's a zoo. That animal is probably an elephant. How did we understand it's an elephant? Because it has a very long hose. And do you see that? There are even eyeballs, not just the eyes, but eyeballs. There is a very pretty decent nose and hands and fingers, legs and feet. And there is even a smiling sun. This is always there. You know, in every picture a child draws, there is the sun. If there's a sun, that sun has to be smiling. If there's a cloud, there could be at least a couple of clouds. And these are very typical. But see, this is much more precise and much more complex. Right now, we understand. This is a drawing generally accepted by an 8 to 9-year-old child with more finger flexion. But we can see these kind of pictures in 5-year-olds too. We should be able to notice these things, because if a 5-year-old is able to draw a picture with this amount of detail, then probably that kid has an extraordinary skill when it comes to drawing. The more the child has paintings and tables and chairs suitable for their size, or the more they observe other people drawing, these drawing skills develop earlier than the given ages. And the last part is fine motor coordination, is finger tapping. In finger tapping, these kind of activities are also used by neurologists to understand, you know, brain and hand coordination and other things. It improves with age. So it is like, where is the camera? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and backwards. So this could be one of the things expected from you to do. Or the doctor might tell you that do 2 of them. Or, you know, first, third, and 5. And then the fourth and the second. All of these and your ability of doing these things are signs of your neural mental coordination. Thumb and finger tapping together. These are repetitive movements. As rapidly as possible. Do it faster, faster, faster, faster, faster. Or you might be expecting successive movements, like a series of movements. So this is, a repetitive movement, but this is a successive movement, a series of moves that can follow each other. People with neurological disorders are able to do some of those, but not able to do some of the others. And these tests are enabling doctors to notice which areas, which parts of the brain might be having some neural difficulties. These fine motor skills change in later stages of life, and the first things we lose is our fine motor skills. And the neural degeneration in general contributes to slowing and decreased coordination. But physical fitness, practice, this is why it is very important to keep your elderly doing things. For example, if you have a favorite food that is cooked by your grandma, which requires a lot of work, sometimes you kind of feel like, okay, it's too much to ask from them. Please don't think that. Just ask for it. The more elaborate the food, the better it is. Because one, it's going to help them practice and make use of their fingers and hands, which will increase and maintain fitness. Two, it's going to give them a purpose and a sense of self-esteem that not only helps, mental and psychological and social status, but also it helps the elderly person have more trust in their motor and physical abilities. O yüzden mesela sarma, işte el açması bilmem ne böreği filan gibi böyle emekli zahmetli şeyleri istemekten çekiniyorsanız büyük annelerinizden sakın çekinmeyin. Büyük babalarınızın yaptığı belli bir takım el işleri vardır belki işte çakma, delme, yapma vesaire bir takım şeyler. İşte yormayayım adamı demeyin mesela. Aksine bırakın yorulsun, kendilerine bir görev verin. Kendilerini hem bir işe yaramış hissetsinler hem de el becerileriyle ilgili pratik yapmış olsunlar. Mesela size kısa kısa notlar yazsınlar. Make them write you small notes. Keep writing. Solving puzzles is a very elderly thing, and it's a great thing because it helps maintenance of handwriting as well as mental status as well. So keep your elderly in action if you don't want them to lose their motor skills in a faster fashion. This is the moral of this story. So let's give a break, and then we're going to carry on talking about cognition. Okay, I am very sorry, and my energy could be a little bit low in the second half of it. I think I'm going through a mild food poisoning, something like that. But we have to move forward, so I will go as far as I can, and afterwards we're going to complete wherever we need to come later on. So this point, what we are going to be talking is the essence of all developmental psychology. Because when we understand how cognition works, we understand how language development works, we understand how personality development works, we understand how moral development works. So all of these are very much related to how our thinking and understanding evolve. And this theory, which we will learn two different approaches, Piagetian approach and Vygotskian approach, are the most elementary, is the most basic and the most important part of this whole lesson. When you understand these concepts, it's going to be much easier to understand, compare, and contrast this with other elements. So when we talk about cognition, it is recognizing, interpreting, judging, reasoning, being able to define all forms of behaviors that goes on in our minds. Thinking, noticing, perceiving, and then making meaning out of it. And Jean Piaget, who is going to be our closest friend for the rest of this semester, is one of the most influential researchers in this field, in this area, and has given us very important terms and ideas during the 20th century. Piaget himself was a biologist, actually, to begin with, and later on, he evolved into working with more how people are thinking. And he was a philosopher as well. He studied philosophy too. So he considered himself a genetic epistemologist. What does this mean? He was very, very, very interested in to understand how do we know things? This is the basic question of epistemology. How do we know? How do we know that we know? How do we build understanding and knowledge about the world around us? And he started with a very basic premise. Human beings are different from other animals because they can use abstract, symbolic reasoning. Now, here I always like to put a small asterisk, a small footnote. During his times, it made sense for Piaget to think it like that. But when I look at the nature, when I look at the animals, I don't really think human beings are the only species that are able to think symbolically, that are able to think abstractly. We know that there are certain primates who are able to read and who are able to calculate things. We know there are ravens and crows who can actually solve problems by just looking at a mechanism. So these are all about symbolic reasoning, being able to do things and use your memory and understanding about that thing without actually being at the presence of that thing. They solving problem is a mental skill. And we know octopuses solve problems. We know dolphins solve problems. We know certain birds are very good at solving certain problems. So I don't think, I mean, yes, they have a language and they have a communication structure. They pass information from one to the other and they hold that information transgenerationally. And we don't understand that. But our lack of understanding does not necessarily mean it's not there. But human brain, primate brain, is a little bit more complicated than brains of certain other animals. Therefore, probably our hypothetical thinking, our what ifs, our understanding of past, present, and future is stronger than many other species. I can agree with that. Piaget said there are 4 factors that changes the way we think. 4 influential elements that makes us cognitively develop and grow. First of all, first one is biological maturation. So this means certain things happen when the time comes. They are almost automatically wired, embedded into our mental structures. So when the time comes, we start talking. When the time comes, we start walking. These are genetically programmed at conception. Then there is activity. Because with increased physical and biological maturation, there comes increased, more elaborate, and more enriched interaction with the environment, acting on the environment. And when we talk about acting on the environment, don't only think about it as changing something like, cutting a tree, putting something on top of other. A communication is an act on environment. A dialogue is an act on environment. Human beings, not just inanimate objects, but human beings are also a part of our environment. So we as individuals, we do something to our environment. The environment responds. We learn something as a result of that response, and we alter our thinking processes accordingly. And another important thing is reaching equilibrium between these 2 aspects, our biological maturation and our activity. As increased activity, we encounter with more complicated, more complex problems, more complex issues or realities, facts that comes around the world. And that leads us to a sense of imbalance. And we hate that sense of imbalance, because when we are imbalanced, it means we are not making meaning. We are not understanding we are not understanding the world that is surrounding us. Therefore, our main aim is to reach that equilibrium somehow, some way. And also social experiences. We don't only learn by acting on the environment all by ourselves, but we also learn by social transmission from other people. Piaget says intelligence is demonstrated. He was very influenced by Charles Darwin, by the way. Intelligence is demonstrated by our ability to adapt to our environment. You know what Charles Darwin has said, right? What is the main premise of Darwin's theory of evolution? Yes, Botir.
That we evolved from monkeys.
No, that's exactly that's totally what he didn't say. That is a very, popular and common sense, common knowledge thing, but it's a very big misconception. He says we are sharing, and by the way, we all belong to the same familia. We are all we are all different forms of primates, but we have evolved from not the monkeys that we have seen today. I mean, look at the size of monkeys and look at us. But we have been evolved. We are evolved version of some different other forms of primates, because we had Homo erectus, then we are Homo sapiens. But before Homo sapiens, the thinking human, we had other forms of animals. We were like gorillas, walking on our 4 foot. Then we began to work on our 2 legs and stand up, erect. That's how it comes to Homo erectus. So Darwin did not really say that, but Darwin tried to explain why such an evolution is happening and what is the answer to this question. He said something much more significant than that. Why do we evolve? Yes, Lamar.
Is it to survive by like adapting to our environment?
Very good. Because the environment changes, whether we want it or not. And we have to adapt or we go extinct. So when he was talking about survival of the fittest, he wasn't talking about survival of the strongest species and the rest goes away. If that were the case, we wouldn't have dinosaurs gone extinct. And again, if that were the case, sloths, tembel hayvanlar, would have been gone extinct millions of years ago. Sloths are the slowest animals on the planet. Yet they are with us, they are surviving, and nothing is happening to them. Isn't it very awkward? Like normally these animals should have their natural predators eating them without even spending any effort. It's almost like pulling an apple from the tree. How do you think sloths are surviving? Or have you ever thought of that? Hiç tembel hayvanlar niye soyları tükenmedi? Ama bizim mamutlarımız, o koca koca mamutlarımız, koca koca dinozorlarımız, bilmem nelerimiz yok şu anda ortada. Ondan sonra hiç düşündünüz mü bununla ilgili olarak? Ya da bir fikriniz var mı? Yes, Gökçen.
Well, maybe they are consuming less energy to compare. Sorry about the
Slow.
dog.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I have a cat, and normally she would have been interrupting the class as well, but she's sleeping right now. I think she found the whole thing very boring. So repeat your answer again, Gökçen. I did not understand what you were saying.
Maybe they are consuming less energy to survive, and
I
they
mean,
can hide very well.
yes, slow living. Ulduz also is saying the same thing about slow living. But see, in the nature, if you are slow, you're dead. Something will hunt you. Why do other animals who are living, other predators who are living in the same habitat with these animals, don't hunt the sloths? Yes, Rodina.
Hajam, if we look at sloths generally, they spend most of their time on like high areas like trees or like above the ground, so most predators in their area can't really reach them.
Eagles could have reached them, but eagles are not eating them as well, or vultures. See, it's a very interesting fact. I'm just, making a mental exercise. I wasn't expecting you to give me a straightforward answer, but I was trying to just arouse some ideas in your mind to think about those things. See, there are certain interesting premises when it comes to nature. Number one, in nature, I mean, hunters are not only human hunters, Ulgus. I mean, gazelles, ceylanlar, are eaten by lions, and bunnies are hunted by eagles. So it's just like it's really not about how much their consumption and how productive they are. I mean, these are actually the easiest animal to hunt. If you think of rabbit is running, sloth is just being, existing. But the eagle is running after the bunny, picking it up, but not after the sloth, because they are just slow enough. They are so slow, not too slow to die, but slow enough to create a symbiotic relationship with a lot of other parasites and animals and moss and fungus that is existing in the environment. So they can blend in well, but more importantly, they are so slow that they are not perceived as living animals. See, in nature, with the exception of a couple of species, all animals hunt their prey live. They don't eat carcass. Leşker, yani ölmüş hayvan tüketen çok çok az hayvan vardır doğada. Özellikle et yiyen karnivorlar arasında. Karnivorlar taze et ister, taze et yerler. Ondan sonra karnivorların yiyip bitiremediklerinde zaten işte böcekler, doğanın kendisi, bakteriler, diğer şeyler sistemin içerisine tekrar dahil eder. İşte leş yiyen de akbaba makbaba gibi bir iki tane hayvan var. Ama çoğunlukla durmuş, ölmüş hayvan eti yemezler doğa içerisindeki canlılar. Ve tembel hayvanlar o kadar ama o kadar ama o kadar yavaşlar ki canlı gibi algılanmıyorlar diğer hayvanlar tarafından. They are not perceived as live prey, and therefore they are not hunted. They are thought as, rotten meat. So isn't this an incredible sign of adaptation to the environment? If you're not going to get faster, then maybe you need to be slower in order to survive. And by the way, I mean, this whole parasitic living on the, sloth thing is very interesting. In some places, there are sanctuaries for sloths. So I have actually seen a documentary about it, and I found it hilarious. So in order for them not to get sick with all this symbiotic living on their body, these people in the sanctuaries, they bathe sloths in, in water that is not flavored, I'm not going to say, but mixed with some very natural herbal stuff that's going to keep them healthy. So what they do is they actually dip the sloth into these baits, into these boxes, sink them in until they're, chins and everything, keep them waiting there for some time. Then they take them off and they hang them. You know how they stand like this all the time until they dry. This is how slow and how touchable and how interesting they are. So adaptation is the most important key here. If you refuse to adapt, you are going to go extinct, period. And in order to adapt, adaptation is a very important tendency. And another important tendency in human beings is organization. Organization is the combining, arranging, recombining, reorganizing behaviors for better adaptation. We put them into systems. Our ideas and thoughts are not just free floating in our mind. They are in boxes. They are in systems. They are connected to each other. And we are born with this tendency. organize our thinking processes into psychological structures. And these are our systems for understanding and interacting with the world. This is how we understand the world. You know, think of a box that has everything in it. How difficult would it be to find something in that box? So we cannot work, our minds cannot work in that cluttered fashion. That's why we open folders and then subfolders and subfolders in our mental structures to organize the data we are looking for so that we would be able to find them. Simple structures are combined and coordinated to make more complex ones. These structures are called schemes. Schemes are blocks. Think of them as bricks of thinking. Sometimes they are very small bricks, sometimes they are big boxes, sometimes they have sub boxes in every big box. It can involve names of things, and it can also involve all memories and other details about things. Individuals use these schemas to represent the world, to understand the world, and to take action about the world. Adaptation to environment is adjusting to environment. And adjusting means organizing our schematic structures in order to understand the environment better. Of course, you know, we look at it, something has changed. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to reorganize our schemas that help us know things, that help us understand things, that help us understand the world, and reach equilibrium between our mental structures and the environment? Because when we don't understand what's happening around us, it means we are not in balance. It is a very, very, very frustrating feeling. So for adaptation, Piaget described two very basic but extremely important and elementary processes. Guys, I'm underlining again, you got to understand how assimilation and accommodation works. This is the key to understand life. When you understand what assimilation and accommodation, but when I say understand, not just memorize the definition, but understand how it happens, it will be much easier for you to make meaning of the world around you, even when things are confusing. So assimilation is very similar to the actual meaning of the word. And when we are assimilating, we are using our existing schemas to make sense in life. So we meet a new stimuli, a novel stimuli, something we have not seen before. We compare it to what we already know about similar things. And if it fits in, that it means we assimilated and we reached equilibrium. Your grandfather has a beard, so all bearded men are called grandfathers. They're all your grandfather. Or let's say you have a cat. The cat at home, the cat has 2 ears, 4 paws, a tail, a fur. And you kind of note this data into your cat schema. So things with 4 paws, 2 ears, a tail, they are called cats. So it's a pre-existing cognitive structure, and you either fit the new stimuli into what you already know, you know, compare and say, okay, it fits into this, it means I'm assimilated it, or change the knowledge. Sometimes we do that too if the knowledge is just too complicated for assimilation. But we cannot assimilate everything. If we were to assimilate everything, we would have just one schema and fit everything under that schema, which would be impossible, which would make it impossible for us to understand the world. So we need to accommodate as well. Accommodation is opening, finding a new slot, new space, new folder for the new coming information. Changing the existing schemas in order to understand the new situation, especially, or creating an entire new schema, especially this new information, new stimuli, is impossible to fit in whatever we know. Remember the cat, 4 paws, 2 ears, tail. Okay, we noted it down. And then we see a dog, a small dog on the street. And the baby says, Mom, look, it's a cat. Why? Because we compared it. 2 paws, 2 ears, check. Fur, check. Tail, check. 4 paws, check. So it must be a cat. But then the adult around us corrects us and says, no, no, no, no, no, that's not a cat, that's a dog. Cats meow, dogs ho ho, they bark. Now we have two new information that we need to organize. First of all, we add the meowing data into our already existing cat schema. And now we have to open a new schema for dogs because dogs are not cats. They don't meow, they bark. And as you grow older, you notice that, the sizes of dogs really vary. Some of them are very big. So it is practically impossible to fit the dog into our existing cat schema. We have to accommodate to understand it. So see, this is the example that I have been talking about. So when we look at this learning model, we need to focus on one very important thing. We start forming schemas as soon as we are born, but those are very minimal schemas, very minimal data. We start understanding signs of memory formation in human beings, human babies, human offsprings at around 5 to 7 months. Before that, it's more reflexive and more instinctual than actually memory-based. And after we start forming schemas, for babies, for children, everything is new, by the way. There is nothing unsurprising about the context. Everything is surprising about the new context. And as adults, by the way, right now, you are encountering a new stimuli. I'm teaching you something you did not know before. So this is a new stimuli. A new stimuli, if we are not able to assimilate it immediately and understand, it gives us disequilibrium. So rule number 1, human mind is conditioned, is practically designed to get out of the disequilibrium structure as soon as possible. Disequilibrium, aka not understanding your environment, not understanding this new stimuli, not being unable to make meaning of this thing that is happening around us, is an extremely uneasy and frustrating feeling. Disequilibrium makes us, anxious. Disequilibrium makes us angry. So we need to get to equilibrium immediately. What is the easiest way to get to equilibrium? It is assimilation. Because second rule, human mind is geared towards economy. Assimilation is much more economic. It requires minimum amount of mental resources. So you just look at these two things, you believe they are similar, you put them in the same box. You assimilated it. Now, did it fit in? If it fit in, it's okay. What if it didn't? I mean, you forced it to fit in, but it doesn't fit in anymore. It's not a part of it. Then we're back to disequilibrium. And at that moment, we need to accommodate. We now need a new schema, need to understand something completely in a unique and orderly way. And that accommodation, after that, if we end up understanding it, then we are in equilibrium. But not every attempt of accommodation means it's going to be accurate. Sometimes you open a new box of meaning for it and still it doesn't fit. Disequilibrium again, and you reaccommodate until you reach equilibrium. But as you see, accommodation is much more difficult. That's why when you're learning a new topic, when you're learning a new chapter, especially in essentially difficult courses, difficult fields, you are always in equilibrium. You try to understand, but you can't. It makes you very frustrated. You need something to fit it into your mental structures. But then there are also certain topics that are easy. So it's much easier for you to reach equilibrium as a result of understanding. And if the situation is simply too unfamiliar, we might even ignore the information. So you're hearing something in the middle of the night, you're sleeping down, some sound is coming from the environment in the living room. It gives you a very uneasy feeling. It makes you feel awkward. So if you have a cat, what is the first thing you think? Oh, that must be the cat making the noise. And it reaches us to equilibrium all at once. So see, there is an interesting point in terms of all of these things. Why did I say understanding assimilation and accommodation makes it easy to understand life altogether? For a specific reason. Because assimilation and accommodation is not only about, okay, I'm seeing a new animal, I am trying to make meaning of it. I see a new gadget, I am trying to understand what it does. No, it's not like that. Our stereotypes, our prejudices, our generalizations also a part of an assimilation process. And every human has prejudices. Every single one of us use stereotypes and generalizations. And you might find it very interesting to hear, but these generalizations are not only normal, but they're also necessary. They work as an insurance policy to our survival. We don't always have time to think through and consider and decide which box should I be fitting this into and blah, blah, whatsoever. Accommodation is not practical, is not economic. That's why we avoid it at all costs. So having these general ideas, general beliefs about things help us make decisions faster. Fast decision making is all about equilibrium, so getting rid of the frustration, as well as survival. I mean, in the middle of the night, you're walking on a dark alley, you see a guy approaching you, a big guy, bearded guy, chains all over the place, a biker type of guy with a lot of tattoos and everything. The guy doesn't really look like the nicest person on earth. So what do? Let me start having a conversation with this person and make sure if this person is good or not. No, you don't do that. You change your sidewalk. You go to the other side of the road. You try to walk faster and pass this guy as quickly as possible because you have a prejudice in your mind, and those prejudices do not come out of nowhere. They come from either your own experiences or the experiences of others. So you kind of think this person must be dangerous, and therefore you need to protect yourself. and you change your lane, you change your direction, you do something to avoid the person. Next day, you go to a shop, you see the same guy, but smiling and laughing. Let's say this guy is a veterinarian and he is treating all these kitties and puppies in such a sweet way. How do you feel at that moment? See, I'm such a bad person. I had all this prejudice about this guy, but he's actually very nice. Why do I make such generalization about people who wear tattoos whatsoever? No, do not blame yourself. The problem does not start with having a prejudice, but it starts if you hold on to them as if they are carved in stone, which means if you are dogmatic, if you are a zealot, if you are refusing to accommodate, regardless of all the evidence that your assimilation was wrong, then we have a problem. This is how racism, this is how discriminatory behavior, this is how misogynistic behaviors are spread all around the world. Assimilation is easy, accommodation is difficult, and people do not want to change their thoughts because, see, when we are accommodating things, it's not as simple as opening a new box. When you're a baby, it is that simple because you have a limited amount of schemas anyway. But let's say you are an old person and you have already established a very complicated network of schematic structures. When you're changing one thing, it's like the domino stones. It changes everything. Let's say you are a very, very, very religious person who believes homosexuality is a sin, is an abomination. Okay, you have every right to believe that while it's wrong. These people, or yes, say you say people are not born with this, but they are just learning it, so it can be unlearned. And then a lot of people, some of these people find out that their own children are queer. For some of them, at the beginning, it's a huge disequilibrium, right? They don't want to accept it. They deny it. They think it's treatable. They, try to find a solution to a problem, etc. But eventually, some of them come to terms with the reality that this is who their kids are. And all of their pre-existing assumptions about queerness might not necessarily be correct. So this means they have to transform. They have to change a lot of things in their mental structures to make meaning and understanding of this new information. But then again, we also know that some parents just refuse to do it, refuse to acknowledge their children. They even refuse to acknowledge that these kids are their children. They refuse their kids because what they have believed all this time in their minds is such a strong set of information that shapes everything in their mind, in their mental structures. Changing it requires too much effort, and they are just simply avoiding that change. They refuse to acknowledge that they were wrong about certain things. So that is the part where it becomes problematic. When we hold on to our assimilated schemas, when we hold on to our assimilations, when we hold on to our schemas as they are, refusing to change them no matter what. But having these assimilations regarding these generalizations, these ideas, these thoughts about people, it is not bad. It is not great. You should not be relying on them all the time too often, but it is not as bad as it sounds because that's the only way you can actually make your decisions to save your life and to survive in an environment or to get rid of disequilibrium as fast as possible. So That's the first thing you do. That's your first initial attempt, assimilate, to get rid of disequilibrium. But only after that, you got to go back, you got to sit, you got to think through and see whether or not the assimilation you have done is correct. If it's not, then there is the only way, the only intelligent and rational way to approach the situation is accommodation. So are we good up until this point? Have we understood? Okay, I am going to stop now because this is already too much information. I need you to go over especially this second part. Schemas, equilibrium, disequilibrium, assimilation, accommodation. You got to understand these because in our next session, we'll be talking about stages in cognitive development. And when we're talking about those stages, we are going to refer to these themes, to these topics a lot. Okay? So therefore, I will announce you when we are going to be meeting, which is probably going to be on Sunday. However, until then, please make sure you understand, you internalize these concepts. See you in the weekend. Bye-bye.